April 18, 1943, over the North Sea at 6:40. The North Sea lay still, its surface pressed flat by cold air. 30 miles east of Helgoland, a single aircraft traced a gray arc through low stratus cloud. The Bristol Beaufighter, registration faded beneath frost, carried the sound of strained machinery. Twin Hercules engines coughing through the damp. Inside, Lieutenant Alfred Capel, age 26, adjusted the trim by feel. The dials gave him half-truths. Oil pressure wavered. Fuel gauges jittered against the glass. The air smelled of lubricant and cold metal. Beneath him, the sea shifted like molten lead, unbroken except for the long wake of wind-driven foam. Orders were minimal. Patrol, observe, report. Radio silence, no flares, no deviation. The observer behind him kept his head down, watching the instruments with the patience of routine. Between them, only the sound of engines and the steady vibration through the seat. The aircraft was more than transport now. It was system and shelter, its hum a heartbeat that could not falter. By 06:47, the horizon moved strangely. A tremor of light in the haze. Not motion, but distortion. Vapor, perhaps? Or heat rising from exhaust? Capel narrowed his eyes, searching for pattern. The sea reflected nothing but dull steel. Still, the shimmer remained. He marked bearing 210. Adjusted 1 degree. Nothing on radar. No contrails above. Silence on the band. The Beaufighter continued forward, obedient to course, until obedience itself began to feel dangerous. Predictability, the enemy's most reliable weapon. The Luftwaffe knew these patrols, knew the routes and timings. System breeds safety, but safety repeats itself. Capel's thumb brushed the signal switch, the smoke canister beneath the fuselage. It was meant for distress marking, not deception. Once triggered, the plume would betray position across miles of sky. Yet it could also break pattern, create confusion, suggest another flight's path. He hesitated. The rule was clear. No unnecessary emissions. The airframe groaned. Instruments ticked down by fractions. At 06:51, a low hum reached through the fog. Not mechanical failure. Something outside. A different frequency, faint but deliberate. Twin engines, closing. The observer leaned forward. A nod. Nothing spoken. The shimmer thickened. A curve, then shadow. Enemy pursuit, still invisible but near enough that the sea began to echo it. Capel's pulse stayed level. He counted seconds between static bursts on the radio. The pattern matched none of their own. He made his decision quietly. A single press, the canister released. Thick white smoke tore across the gray, dispersing into the mist like a wound in the weather. The Beaufighter banked left, slow and deliberate, vanishing beneath its own trail. Moments later, shapes appeared above the cloud. 2 Focke-Wulfs, circling the false signal. Their guns flickered briefly, tracing empty air. The smoke carried west, marking a ghost. Capel's aircraft slipped beneath the layer. Engines throttled low. The sea swallowed them. By 07:03, silence returned. Later, at base, the debrief was short. The patrol recorded no engagement, no loss, no confirmation. The officer of record noted initiative under unclear conditions. No commendation followed. The system did not reward instinct. It rewarded function. In the logbook, Capel wrote only the date, time, and weather. Nothing about the shimmer or the sound or the choice. Years later, the flight remained absent from citations. Another small correction in the machinery of war. Victory belonged to systems, engines, routes, timetables. The cold logic of endurance. The record shows only this. April 18, 1943. Patrol completed. Fuel remaining. No contact. But above the North Sea, one decision altered a pattern the enemy trusted. Would you have turned the switch? Capel had grown up near Kiel, a shipyard town, air thick with salt and the smell of steel being cut. His father worked among turbines, engines the size of houses, the noise constant enough to erase conversation. Alfred learned early that machines spoke in rhythm, not words. When the pitch changed, something was wrong. Before the war, he maintained diesel units on merchant trawlers. He listened to their balance, memorized the note of efficiency, the clean hum when all cylinders worked as one. Precision became a form of calm. His father used to say that metal rewarded attention. Ignore it, and it punished you. That same faith carried into the war. The Beaufighter was no different from an engine room. Oil, vibration, measurable trust. Capel treated the cockpit like a workshop. Every lever polished smooth. Every gauge aligned to his eye. He handled gun barrels with the same focus once given to turbine blades. Wiped down, checked for scoring, counted turns under his breath. The smell never changed. Oil, cordite, and damp leather. It grounded him more than rank or insignia. Capel distrusted ceremony. Medals clinked too loudly. Stories of heroism distorted function. He believed courage lived inside repetition. The act of doing the required thing, even when no one watched. Reliability was courage's quiet twin. The men in his squadron called him the mechanic who flew. It wasn't mockery. They meant it literally. He flew by diagnosis, listening for misalignment, correcting it before failure. On long patrols, his hands never rested. Each minute became an inspection. To him, survival was maintenance. His smoke generator, standard issue for distress landings, had been altered. A small valve rerouted. A reservoir expanded by hand using scrap aluminum. He'd modified it during a maintenance cycle, filing edges until the fit felt exact. No order required it. Curiosity did. The system is strongest where men still think like craftsmen. By that April morning, fog closed around his aircraft like insulation. The horizon vanished into gray. Moisture clung to the windscreen. Droplets shook loose in the vibration. He watched the altimeter settle, then rise again by a hair's width. The sea beneath was unseen, only sensed through reflected cold. Capel adjusted the throttle slightly. The sound told him more than the dials did. One engine carried a faint lag. Fuel mixture fractionally rich. He corrected it, muttering the numbers. The act was ritual, not worry. He remembered his father's workshop. The clatter of tools against steel plates. The hiss of cooling pipes. That rhythm had built his sense of order. Each problem answered by method. Never impulse. Yet, as he stared into fog thick enough to erase the wingtips, he felt the weight of another question forming beneath routine. Could invention exist within obedience? The manual said no. The system demanded uniformity. But systems were designed by men who had never heard a Hercules engine falter mid-flight. He checked the pressure gauge again. The needle trembled, uncertain. No orders came through, only static, thin as breath. In that silence, he waited, not for command, but for the machine to speak first. By Euro 639, the sea and sky were indistinguishable. Only the pulse of the engines held the boundary between survival and surrender. In war, endurance belongs to the mechanism that keeps running after belief has thinned. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the compass drift. Still no signal, still alone in static. He reached once more for the modified switch, feeling the small notch he'd filed into the casing weeks before. The same motion as his father's hand, steady and exact. Invention, waiting beneath obedience. The mission was not combat. It was logistics in the air, precision shaped into flight. The Beaufighter's duty was to escort a convoy of merchant vessels carrying aviation fuel from Hull to Stavanger's supply points. Below, 30 ships moved at 6 knots through fog-drifted lanes, their decks coated with frost, their holds filled with liquid fire. Each tanker was a link. Together they formed a line of steel, steam, and trust, the artery of an empire at war. Above them, the Beaufighter circled as custodian, unseen but known. A node in the network, Capel's aircraft connected refinery to runway, refinery to sortie, sortie to survival. Every victory begins as a shipment manifest. Capel flew on bearings, not instinct. He knew the timetables by memory. Departure tides, convoy spacing, radio checks at scheduled silence intervals. The mathematics of war was punctuality. Delay equaled loss. Fuel missed by one tide meant aircraft grounded, missions canceled, lives measured against tonnage. The engines hummed without rhythm change. Their sound was the only confirmation that the system still functioned. Inside the cockpit, Capel marked his coordinates, cross-checked against convoy drift. Each notation on his pad echoed the pulse of a larger machine. Refinery, rail, harbor, hull, propeller. The sound of machinery linked them all, a chain suspended above the waterline. At 0710, visibility dropped again. The North Sea absorbed the ships one by one. Only the faint silhouettes of masts rose through vapor. From that height, the convoy looked immobile, frozen mid-transit, engines muffled by mist. Yet Capel knew their speed by the pattern of his own turning radius. 6 knots, constant, reliable. The radio stayed quiet. Contact was rationed like fuel. Words consumed bandwidth, and bandwidth revealed presence. Silence was protection. He listened instead to the static, reading small shifts of tone, frequencies bending under weather and distance. The noise was his conversation with the unseen system. Beneath the wings, fog clung to the horizon in layers, gray folding into gray. A faint gleam off metal suggested the convoy's lead ship. The pattern of wakes aligned, a formation invisible on any map, yet exact as circuitry. Capel adjusted his altitude by 200 feet, enough to preserve oversight while remaining masked. He noted the smoke plumes, Small, faint columns from the merchant funnels, disciplined and steady. Each vessel kept spacing as prescribed. 9 cables between hulls. A collision would mean fire, an entire column lost to a single mistake. The order below reflected the order above. For 2 hours, he traced their perimeter. The gauges told their own arithmetic. Fuel rate, oil temperature, oxygen flow. He measured endurance against the convoy's distance to landfall. Each fluctuation, however minor, carried consequence across the entire chain. Refinery to pilot to sailor. By Oro 9 Ruse, the fog deepened. The sea surface disappeared again, replaced by textureless light. The ships continued unseen, trusting the aircraft above to sense danger first. That trust was the foundation of the system. Faith in the unseen. Discipline in repetition. Capel's aircraft was no longer a weapon, but an extension of infrastructure. He understood that machines did not fight wars. They maintained them. The victory of one depended on the unbroken motion of thousands like it. Engines, pumps, propellers, each requiring human intuition at its weakest point. The system survives when each part believes it is ordinary. The Beaufighter continued its loop. A constant sound in constant weather. No signal, no contact. Only continuity. Beneath him, unseen through fog, 30 ships pushed forward, trusting that sound to mean safety. Their course remained true. Their speed, unchanged. The system held. Would you have trusted silence that long? The first unease arrived as rhythm, not an alarm, not a sound. A difference. The engines, tuned by habit to one steady pulse, drifted from uniformity. A faint lag, then correction. The kind of change felt more than heard. The breath of imbalance in a closed system. Capel adjusted the throttle. The gauges read normal. Oil pressure held steady. Altimeter unchanged. Yet the tone of the air shifted, a hollow between the beats. The Beaufighter's wings carried that uncertainty through cloud, slicing invisible moisture, its metal skin flexing against the cold. The horizon was gone, only gradations of gray. Cloud merged with sea, indistinguishable except for a duller sheen where the water lay. He squinted toward the dim line that separated one void from another. Nothing moved, yet motion was felt, behind or above or both. The observer leaned forward, gestured once. A contour in the mist, darker, heavier. Then it vanished. For a moment, silence became tension, measured by breath. Capel rechecked his bearing. Compass true, heading constant. Still, the pitch of the Hercules engines unsettled him. They hummed at one frequency, but the echo came back doubled, slightly off, like 2 machines running the same task from different rooms. He reached toward the radio. Static filled the headset. No words, no signals. Just a full, compressed noise. The kind that absorbed all meaning. The official doctrine was clear. Maintain silence unless ordered otherwise. Distress calls revealed position. Position meant target. He wrote a single line into the flight log. Possible pursuit vector, 0652. Every system demands obedience until the system itself begins to question its own rhythm. The Beaufighter held course. Cloud density increased. Condensation beaded across the canopy glass, then froze at the edges. Each vibration through the fuselage felt magnified, each second drawn longer than the one before it. Below, the convoy continued unseen, trusting its guardian to hold its pattern. The chain depended on him. One pilot, one machine, one loop of endurance above the sea. To deviate was to break rhythm. To stay meant invisibility and risk. At 0655, another sound entered the mix. Low, distant, not natural to this aircraft's tone. It came as a suggestion, the faint beating of propellers out of sync, faint but intentional. The air carried it unevenly, distorting pitch as fog shifted density. Capel's fingers hovered above the throttle quadrant. The observer tilted his head, straining. Then nothing, only static. He could have signaled command, a short pulse, a single coded phrase. But the radio's hiss warned him off. The frequency was saturated, too uniform to trust. Somewhere, someone else transmitted, or jammed. When systems overlap, silence becomes their collision point. The Beaufighter remained steady, its instruments unwavering. Yet outside, the unseen airframe persisted, pacing them through fog. Capel felt its presence as weight, a mirror shape, unseen but real, matching his altitude and turn radius. His machine trembled once, pressure from displaced air, then settled. The decision hung there. The order said, maintain silence. Instinct said, act before procedure decays into consequence. He kept the course another minute. Each tick on the clock lengthened. Each vibration hinted at proximity. By Aero 658, his hand rested near the signal switch, the modified valve he had built himself weeks earlier. The static grew thinner now, almost deliberate, like listening through fabric. Still no voice, still no order. He waited for certainty that would not come. The bowfighter continued forward, alone in the cloud, engines carrying discipline into uncertainty. The observer stared into fog, eyes fixed on the invisible. The hum returned to its steady rhythm, but something out there, something unseen, was still keeping pace. Inside the cockpit, procedure stood like a wall. Every action had its place, every system its rule. The bowfighter existed within that discipline. Bolts, circuits, manuals, orders. Even instinct had an assigned interval. But the rhythm had changed. The air no longer sounded clean. A foreign tone threaded through the constant drone. Faint, deliberate, too regular to be wind. Capel's hand rested near the throttle. The observer's silence behind him felt heavy. Both men knew what procedure required. Maintain position, await verification, do not deploy unauthorized countermeasures. Regulations were written for visibility or control. This guy had neither. He recalled the rule exactly. Smoke generators are to be used only under command authority. Unauthorized discharge constitutes breach of protocol. The sentence had no warmth, no room for choice. Still, one line deeper in the same manual offered an engineer's aside. A note that exhaust emissions could distort an aircraft's silhouette, breaking optical recognition. A loophole. Not permission, but logic. He ran the equation twice in his head, as if balancing turbine pressure. The act was mechanical. Cause, effect, risk. The numbers never changed. Acting alone would expose his position to friendly and hostile alike. Waiting might invite pursuit closer. The hum deepened. A rhythm beneath rhythm. Propellers closing from the rear quadrant. Still no signal on the receiver. The frequency hissed, the kind of static that swallows transmission entirely. Capel flexed his hand once, the tendons stiff from cold. His fingers brushed the switch guard. He could feel the slight play in its hinge, something he had repaired himself weeks before. A fraction of resistance that reminded him the system was still physical, still breakable. The noise grew clearer now. Twin engines, slightly out of tune with his own. German radial, he guessed. Focke-Wulf configuration, by pulse spacing. His hearing, trained by years in workshops, separated the beats. He turned his head slightly, scanning the cloud boundary. No outline, just gray movement. Yet the air pressure told the truth. There was mass nearby, another machine closing. When procedure meets proximity, discipline becomes delay. He thought of his father in Kiel. The steady sound of spanners on turbine casings. The lesson delivered without words. Machines, when cornered, reveal their truth through noise. The bowfighter vibrated, a faint tremor passing through the frame. Not turbulence, wake disturbance. The distance between pursuer and prey measured in seconds now. Capel's breath slowed. His mind reduced itself to function. Throttle, altitude, signal valve. Each item locked in sequence. He imagined the convoy below, unaware, their engines trusting the unseen aircraft above. To them, he was one more mechanism in the chain. If he failed, the chain broke silently. The hum became intent. Not proximity, pursuit. He had seconds. Discipline or adaptation. Rule or survival. The doctrine said, obey until told otherwise. Instinct said, obey the machine. Capel's hand hovered, then held still. The engines maintained their tempo, waiting for command that would not come. The static folded in on itself, a perfect imitation of silence. Outside, the unseen sound moved closer, steady as fate. Systems are precise until fear demands improvisation. He inhaled once, slow, the kind of breath before labor, before motion. His eyes stayed fixed on the altimeter, but his thoughts drifted to steel benches and the smell of oil. Every rule written by man began with someone breaking one. Would you have trusted the book? Or the instinct born of oil and metal? The decision came without words. Capel's hand moved before his thoughts caught up. A controlled pull, smooth, mechanical. The auxiliary lever engaged, and a thin plume escaped the tailplane. White against gray. The exhaust thickened, twisting into the slipstream. Regulations forbade it. The manual named it deception, not defense, but the manual did not feel the rhythm closing from behind. The twin pulse that matched his own, but stayed, unseen. The first trace of smoke drifted back, curling through the cold air, dissolving, reforming. The bowfighter slowed fractionally as Capel eased the throttle down. The plume widened, its edges frayed by turbulence. From above, it would read like damage, a wounded engine, burning oil. The observer turned once, eyes meeting his. No signal, no protest, just breath, held and released. The engines maintained their low hum, the vibration constant beneath the floor plates. The white trail grew denser, folding upon itself in slow arcs, creating a wavering curtain across the flight path. It did not belong to doctrine. It belonged to instinct. Somewhere behind them, the pursuer wavered. The noise shifted, a delay in pattern, a hesitation. In the unseen space of cloud, decisions collided. Predator unsure, prey unseen. Capel held his course steady. He knew the effect would not last. The smoke, once dispersed, would leave only question. But question was time, and time meant distance. For several seconds, there was nothing but vibration and cold. The fuselage creaked under strain. Frost gathered along the canopy seals. The illusion held. The bowfighter now trailing what looked like exhaust failure, the kind that marked an easy kill or a lost cause. The unseen rhythm broke. A new tone, faint, metallic, entered, then receded. A shift of propeller wash told its story. One aircraft altering direction. The pursuer had turned. Neither man spoke. The observer released his breath slowly, fogging the glass. The static in their headsets remained, a constant reminder of isolation. The smoke thinned as air currents carried it away. What remained was the faint, drifting residue of burned fuel. A line of defiance written across the sky. The bowfighter resumed climb power, engines stabilizing at 2100 revolutions. Capel did not look back. The instrument stayed within limits. The logbook lay open on his knee, the last entry untouched since 0652. He considered adding another note, a record of deviation, but closed the pad instead. Some acts belonged only to the air. The horizon began to clear. The gray flattened into pale light. Below, the sea continued its endless motion, unaltered by what had occurred above it. The convoy, still miles beneath, moved in formation, unknowing. The rule had been broken. The pursuit was gone. The bowfighter continued its patrol. A machine returned to duty, carrying a secret in its exhaust line. No commendation. No reprimand. Just the return of normal sound. The sky was quiet again. Would you have pulled the lever? Minutes passed. The hum of the bowfighter settled back into rhythm, a steady thrum over the North Sea. The air was colder now, thinner. Nothing moved but cloud. Then, through the static, a pattern broke. A series of clipped transmissions, distant, distorted. Words caught between frequencies. Engaged. Sector South. Returning fire. Static swallowed the rest. Capel listened without reaction. His eyes stayed on the fuel dials, methodical, exact. Every number meant distance, every fluctuation a calculation of endurance. The transmission repeated, stronger this time, from the control station at base. A southern escort formation under attack. Enemy fighters identified. Focke-Wulf 190s. Likely the same patrol that had shadowed his course. He did not speak. The observer noted coordinates, underlined once, then closed the log. Their own sector remained quiet. The bowfighter convoy continued its route, its formation intact, its timetable undisturbed. Below, the ocean carried its slow pulse. Merchant ships, 14 in line, pushed through the fog with their navigation lights shielded. On the lead tanker, a sailor on watch saw a faint streak dissolving in the air above. It looked like exhaust, or the residue of cloud turbulence. He turned away, noting nothing. The engines of his ship kept burning their measured tone, a heartbeat of industry moving through mist. No one aboard those ships knew a decision had been made above them. No one logged it. The convoy passed without interference, each hull marking a coordinate on an invisible chain that linked refinery, airfield, and front line. In logistics, absence is the true measure of success. The system celebrates what does not happen. Elsewhere, 20 miles south, the sounds were different. Reports later described the interception as brief but violent. An escort group hit by a sudden strike, 2 losses, 1 damaged. The attackers disengaged before reinforcements could scramble. The incident closed within minutes. Back in Capel's logbook, the final entry remained unchanged. Fuel levels nominal. Wind south by southwest. No enemies sighted. The page ended clean. He could have claimed foresight. He could have reported the anomaly, written his instincts into the record. Instead, he filed the report as routine. The airframe, he noted, performed within tolerance. Nothing more. The smoke trail that had misled the pursuers was already gone. Scattered into the wider weather system, its last trace absorbed by the wind. What lingered was silence, the kind of silence that holds everything steady. The convoy reached its refueling point by dusk. Cargo intact. Timetable met. The chain continued, one link after another. without acknowledgement of what had been prevented. No commendation. No reprimand. Only the next mission order, printed and folded. Capel flew again 3 days later, his record unchanged. His decision, unauthorized, invisible, never entered the archives, but the absence of loss remained. A blank line in a ledger of statistics. The convoy lived because of a choice no one saw. Would you have claimed credit, or remained silent, knowing silence kept the system whole? By the time the Beaufighter touched down, the incident had already been filed. The convoy was confirmed safe, the chain intact. No enemy sightings recorded in their sector. The mission entered the system as successful, routine, uneventful. In the debrief room, the air smelled of metal polish and cold paper. A clerk typed the after-action summary, the keys clicking with indifferent precision. The official entry read, "Unverified smoke discharge. Cause, mechanical test." No elaboration followed. The document passed from desk to desk without comment, the ink drying into quiet permanence. Capel stood before the table. He read the note once. Then he signed his name in the lower margin. Measured, neat, exact. The signature aligned perfectly with the ruled line beneath, the same way he had signed hundreds before. His commanding officer looked up only briefly. A nod. Nothing more. No questions. No reprimand. The system had no appetite for stories that did not disrupt the timetable. The convoy had reached port. The fuel had been delivered. Every aircraft had returned. The arithmetic balanced. In total war, efficiency is its own morality. The machine rewards results, not reasons. The conversation ended without a word exchanged. The papers were stacked, clipped, and shelved. In the corridor, the muffled rhythm of typewriters carried through the walls like the ticking of a clock. Each keystroke marked another mission, another report, another decision absorbed into procedure. Outside, the hangar doors stood open to the wind. The Beaufighter rested under its tarp. Oil streaked along the undercarriage, salt drying white on the fuselage. Mechanics moved around it with steady pace, checking pressure lines, tightening bolts, logging hours flown. The smoke generator was inspected, cleaned, and marked for calibration. A note was penciled. The sandbag assembly positioned himself